This is Rob Tubbett for Boxing Social in association with Betfred. Delighted, as always, to be joined here down at Team Barry Gym in Las Vegas by the one and only Kevin Barry. How are you, Kev?
Rob, I'm great, mate, and it's always a pleasure to have you here at our gym and to see your smiling British face.
Thanks very much, mate. I'm not always smiling, but I've reserved it just for yourself and Joseph.
Pleasure.
What have you been up to? I was expecting to see you last weekend, and we didn't.
Unfortunately, we aren't in London. We should have been there. In fact, Joe and I and my son Taylor and a couple other members of our team sat down and we watched the fight on the zone, and we were sort of shaking our head. We really wanted to be there for that occasion. It's a fight that we really liked. It's a fight that I think the boxing fans wanted to see, and it was just unfortunate with the illness that Joe had that we couldn't be there.
Talk to us about that illness, because I've been around the sport for, admittedly not as long as you, but for a while, and it's the first time I've ever heard of a spider bite being the cause of an injury. Tell me a little bit about what happened. How did you find out? How did it affect Joe? Just talk to us about that spider bite.
Well, it was a whole new experience for me as well. I'd never had a fighter who had a spider bite before either, and a lot of people find this quite comical, and I know Chisora and some of his people have made snide remarks about it, but the fact is, Joe came back into camp with a rather large sore on his leg that he got in New Zealand, got it checked out, he felt good, it was healing. Training went terrific for the first 4 weeks. He came back to me in great shape. He came back on fighting weight. Had done a lot of strength work because we were expecting a very physical fight with Chisora, and so we wanted to step up the strength work in his off season. And all of a sudden, towards the end of September, everything went downhill. Starting our second week of the sparring phase, Joe just had nothing in the tank. He was suffering from multiple symptoms, so they won't go into, but he literally just got crushed. He went from 100 down to 10 in about 3 days, and it was then that I got him straight in front of a doctor, Dr. Michael Gunter, who's the top sports doctor here in Las Vegas. We had multiple tests, including a lot of intensive blood work and blood cultures done, and the end result was that Joe had received a spider bite in New Zealand that had now taken over his immune system, and he was just crushed.
Sounds quite scary.
Well, when you think that spiders are these little wee tiny insects and they can do something, they can incapacitate a man the size of Joseph Parker, it was a little scary. But 2 weeks, I kept him out of the gym for 2 weeks, which he found really, really hard. Look, for a start off, he found it really hard to accept the fact that he wouldn't be going to London to fight Derek Chisora. In 7 years, Joseph Parker had never pulled out of a fight. We had taken some fights with chronic pain in the elbows before we had the elbow surgeries on both arms. So that had gone on for a couple of years. Joe is not. He is not a soft individual. This is a very serious, hard man, and for him to accept that he wasn't in the right physical condition to take a fight like the one that we had lined up against Derek Chisora was very hard for him to handle.
You kind of mentioned it there about one or two potentially tongue-in-cheek comments, I'm not really sure, from people in Derek Chisora's team about the spider bite. How does that make you feel hearing those things when, it sounds like a pretty serious situation?
Oh, mate, it's like, people that make comments like that, we expect it. We expected a little bit of it. To be real, there's a lot of comments coming out of his camp by everyone, including Chisora. So, for them to make the comments they did, I thought actually they were very light on the comments. I actually thought they were going to come out swinging a lot more than they did. But I think, like Chisora deep down knows that Joseph Parker, is a real guy. Joseph Parker wouldn't just be pulling out of a fight for the sake of pulling out of a fight. Most people who know Joe and have seen Joe fight over the years know there had to be something serious wrong.
What did you make of his fight against David Price? Obviously drafted in on 3 weeks' notice. Derek Chisora got the job done in the 4th round this past weekend. What did you make of his performance?
Well, it was, what can I say? It was typical Chisora. We've had plenty of time to study this guy now. He pushes forward. He goes to the body. He throws an overhand. It's not a secret. He's a guy who tests the legal boundaries of the boxing code of ethics in every fight. He's always trying to do something, whether it's low blows, whether it's hitting on the back of the head, whether it's hitting after the bell, whether it's tweaking your elbow, hitting in the back. That's his game. But we know that's what makes the bully a bully. But his fight against Price, very predictable. He held his hands up. He pushed forward. He put Price under more pressure than what he likes to be put under, and gassed him out and finally caught him with one of the shots. And we knew that when he did catch him, the fight would be over. And I think it was a very good call by Price's corner. That was obviously trainers taking care of their fighter.
When David Haye talks about fighting Alexander Usyk, how does that make you feel? Considering you've been in these negotiations since April with Chisora, you were all but ready to fight 3 weeks out. How does it make you feel when he talks about fighting somebody else now?
Oh, I think it's just part of the game. That he's just teasing us that they have other options when really they don't. He knows that he has to fight Joseph Parker. That fight will take place, and it'll take place in sometime early 2020. Chisora knows it, Haye knows it, and we know it.
So that's the fight that you're looking at for Joseph Parker next, is the Chisora fight. Nothing's changed from your point of view?
Nothing has changed. That's a fight that we've always wanted. We've wanted it since the beginning of this year, 2019, and we thought the fight was going to take place, as did Chisora think the fight was going to take place in October, but it didn't, and it will take place as soon as they can reschedule it.
Obviously, this is not ideal and it's completely out of everybody's control, but Joe, throughout his career, has been very active. The last 12 months, he's not been quite so active, I think it's fair to say. When something like this happens, how does it make you feel, and how frustrating has this period been for yourself and Joseph?
Well, it's been very frustrating, especially for Joe, because he's put a lot of hard work in. And we've signed with a new promoter, Eddie Hearn and Matchroom, and we were hoping that that signing would deliver some big fights to us. So look, this year has been a year where I think we have to look at. There's been a lot happening in Joe's life. Birth of his 3rd child. He changed promoters after being with Duco for 6 years. He's now with Eddie Hearn and Matchroom. We had a very good performance against Alex Leopai in Providence, which I thought was going to set up a really good performance against Derek Chisora, but it didn't work out. So, this is one of those years where, Joe he's done a lot of excellent strength work that there is no replacement of that. His body has really grown and matured. He's a full-grown man now. You heard me talking about Joe having a boy's body for a number of years. He's now got a man's body. He's very strong. He's very powerful. Sure, we had one fight this year. Joe's scheduled to fly back to New Zealand this weekend. He's got some business scheduled for the next month. He'll have Christmas and New Year with the family, and we'll be straight back here. And we'll make sure that 2020 is a much busier year and a much better year for Joseph Parker and for our team.
Considering that and the fact that he has been out of the ring and not been as active as you'd have liked to, I know that you wanted to get him out by the end of the year, but by all accounts that doesn't look likely. Is he going to have quote-unquote a comeback fight next year before he goes into a Chisora fight or somebody of that ilk?
No, look, we had a really good training camp before the Alex Leopai fight. Did a lot of rounds. We had a very solid training camp for the proposed Chisora fight that didn't happen. We'd already had 60 rounds of sparring in. So, this is all good work, even though we never finished it with and led up to a fight. He still had those 60 good rounds of sparring in, a lot of strength work. So I think that right at the moment, Joe's spirits are good. He knows that it was completely out of his hands what's happened this year. So we have to roll with it, and we have to keep our focus. And we know that we're going to get going right in the first month of 2020, and 2020 will be a very good year for us.
We mentioned Alexander Usyk, David Haye and Derek Chisora calling for that fight afterwards. What do you make of Alexander Usyk at heavyweight? Obviously, he had his debut against Chaz Witherspoon not too long ago. Wasn't the fight he was supposed to have, but the fight we ended up with. What do you make of him at heavyweight?
Look, I think Usyk surprised a few people with his first fight at heavyweight. Olympic gold medalist, undisputed cruiserweight champion, great boxer. And, fighting a guy like Chaz Witherspoon, who's been very inactive the last few years, is at the end of his career and took the fight on short notice. I think a lot of people were thinking that he'll have one round to look at him and he'll blast him out in the second or the third. And I don't think that was the sort of performance that they were looking for. I don't think it was the sort of performance that Eddie Hearn and Matchroom were looking for. I think a lot of people wanted to see more strength and more power at heavyweight, and I think we saw in that fight with Alexander Usyk for the first time fighting a heavyweight. Even though not a dangerous puncher, he got very marked up in that fight. He had a lot of marks on his face, which just goes to show there's a big difference between 200-pound and 250-pound.
Is that a fight you'd be open to for Joe?
Look, I think Usyk sitting there as the mandatory with the WBO. I think it's going to be very, very interesting with the rematch between Joshua and Andy Ruiz. What happens if Andy is to win, or what happens if Joshua is to win with the WBO? That's a belt that could actually be vacant. We at the moment are sitting very high with the WBO. I'm not looking for that particular fight right now. Our focus is going to be early next year, shutting Derek Chisora up. But the Usyk and fighting for a WBO world title, if that fight happened, that would be a fight that we'd be very interested in.
Okay, well, we've spoken about Anthony Joshua and Andy Ruiz in several other interviews we've done, so we won't go over that one again. But before we go, and I do appreciate your patience throughout this interview. I'm
a very patient man.
You are a very patient man. We've had several technical issues in this interview, but it's fine. I'm here for Canelo Kovalev, other than to see you, of course. What do you make of that fight this weekend? Canelo jumping up 2 weight classes to face Sergey Kovalev.
Look, I think it's a very interesting fight, and it's a good business fight. And when I say it's a good business fight, I think it's a good piece of business by both guys. Canelo's going to be paid well. Kovalev's making a lot of money at the end of his career. Kovalev, who for the last decade has been very dominant in the light heavyweight division, beating everyone bar Andre Ward, showing huge power, savage power as a light heavyweight. But right at the moment, fighting a young, spirited guy like Canelo, who has obviously developed and improved a lot. His skill has increased over the last 18 months to 2 years. His head movement, his foot placement, his overall ring generalship has really developed in the last 2 years. And when you take that with his young age, I think that youth will prevail here and just be too much for the bigger, stronger Kovalev.
Stoppage?
Look, I tell you what, I think I think it's a fight that will go late. It'll go into the late rounds. I really think that Canelo could put hands on him. But, it's very, it's hard for a 160-pound guy to be hitting a 175-pound beast of a man like Kovalev. It's a lot of wood to chop down. I think a lot of people are reading a lot into the body work of Canelo. We know he's a great body puncher, and that's one of the weaknesses that Kovalev has shown, but really only against one fighter, Andre Ward. No one else has really had the key to be able to expose that. We know that Canelo likes going to the body. It wouldn't matter whether Kovalev has a weakness to the body or not. That's part of Canelo's game. That's what makes him such a complete great fighter, is the ease that he does hit the body, and I think that could be the difference in this fight.
Okay, well, Kevin Barry, as always, real pleasure. Again, thank you very much for your patience throughout this interview. When it goes out, it will look fine. So I should probably just not have said anything. But anyway, thanks very much for speaking to Boxing Social. I'll catch up with you again, hopefully after the fight on Saturday. If not, I'll be here for Wild Raw Teas, and we'll catch up again.
Okay, Rob. Hey, always a pleasure, man, talking to you and the listeners on Boxing Social.